you, Lisa. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and big thanks also to all the volunteers who put this event on, the Cochrane Ecological Institute, and the Calgary Foundation, the Community Foundation. Really appreciate that. So my talk today is on beavers. And you can, it's cute, right? Yeah, that's right. So beaver is Canada's superhero. So for the last few years, I've been researching what makes beavers so special. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our work, some of the history of beavers, some of the basics, biology, some facts, the benefits that they bring to our environment, wetlands, some of the challenges with living with beavers, and some of the non-lethal alternatives that we've been working with in partnership with landowners and municipalities across Canada. So just a quick history. Canada obviously has a very long relationship with beavers. Back in the 1800s, beavers were really sought after because of their fur. Their fur is really thick, it's really well insulating and somewhat waterproof because of the oils on their skin. And the Europeans really liked them because they made really good hats. Those are some examples of some of the hats that beavers were made into. And the European taste for fur almost drove their numbers into extinction. So while beavers are not threatened or endangered in Canada, their numbers are nowhere near what they used to be historically, and that's had a dramatic effect on our landscape. So I find beavers quite fascinating. There's a whole bunch of cool facts about them, and one of the things I like to talk about is how they're really built for their environment. They're totally built to swim. So they've got their front claws are really great for digging. Their back feet are webbed, which help propel them in the water. Their tail is great also to help propel them in water. Their eyes act like swimming goggles. So beavers have a third eyelid, which when they go underwater, it protects sticks and debris and things from getting in. And their nose, their mouth, their ears, again, their evolution over time has just made it possible for them to really live underwater in these incredible environments. Beavers can get pretty big, and so just you see here, 24 to 71 pounds. They can, they're a little clumsy on land. Their tail acts as a prop to kind of help them on land, but they're a little awkward on land. And in the water, studies show that they can hold their breath for about 15 minutes before resurfacing. So some kind of neat, cool facts there. So fun facts about beavers is beavers live in a home called a lodge. They have monogamous pairs mate, and they live 3 generations in a family, in a colony. So there's the parents, the yearlings, and then of course the kits. So the name for baby beavers is kits. So they live in these colonies, and they live in the wild for about 12 years. Beavers are, of course, herbivores. They're social, they're curious, they're hardworking. And they breed in earlier in the year, January to February. And they live in a lodge. Sometimes I hear the words lodge and dam used interchangeably. They're entirely different structures. So the lodge is a name for where the beavers live. It's their home. And of course the dam is the wall that they make to sort of hold back water. But they're two different terms. Interesting fact about beavers is their genitalia is internal. So it's really difficult to sex a beaver unless you want to get super, super close. And sometimes with x-rays and imaging you can tell, but it's very difficult though to tell just with a visual looking at them because their sex organs are internal. So this is an example of a beaver lodge, a really cute illustration. So you can see that it's similar to a muskrat pop-up home. So the beavers, the entrance is underwater, so that makes it safe from predators for accessing their home. Inside their home is typically 2 rooms. There's a dry room and a wet room. So beavers like to stay dry and warm, just like all of us. And they have an underwater food cache is what they rely on throughout the colder months, the winter months. So it's their underwater fridge. So they go and bring branches and leaves and roots and all kinds of different aquatic plants, and then they jam them under their lodge, so they have a nice big food storage to carry them through different months throughout the season. And a beaver dam, of course, is the wall that they build to hold back water, and it creates a wetland. So these obviously are really important structures for ecology. And beaver dams are really solid structures. If you've ever been on a beaver dam, they're very solid. You can walk across them. They're a source of frustration for many municipalities and sometimes landowners. And the world's largest dam is here in Alberta. So it's in Wood Buffalo National Park, and it was found by accident in 2007 from a guy who was using Google Earth and sort of discovered it, and it made some interesting headlines across the world there. So you can see that it is 2,790 feet long. So they believe that it was started way back when by generations of other beavers, and then new beavers have sort of taken over the task and continue to build this wall of China in Alberta. So beavers are a keystone species, and the term is given to animals who other animals are dependent upon. And beavers are a big deal. And so this is sort of a big laundry list of some of the things that beavers do to support other animals and the environment and wetlands. So one of the things that we come across in our nonprofit at Fur Bearers is that beavers are wrecking the forest, they're chewing it all down, they're making a mess, they're killing all the trees. And actually the reverse is true. So when beavers chew trees, it stimulates growth. So the trees respond by creating new shoots because of the damage that beavers are causing, so it actually starts to regenerate forests. And when beavers take trees, it opens up gaps for biodiversity, for different species and other trees to come through. So it's really great. And then, of course, all the life that comes with creating these beautiful wetlands. It's fresh water, which is a source for a lot of different species, insects, bird populations. Salmon is also really significantly attached to beavers and beaver activity. And then, of course, water brings in other mammals, ungulates. So you can see that they're incredibly important. And then this is sort of a diagram succinctly sort of putting it all together. So again, beavers are a keystone species, and the wetlands they create support all these other animals and the species that they support. So it's this intrinsic web of life. So you can see how big of a deal beavers are, and the consequences of removing beavers from an environment and how that can cascade down into all of these other animals and different species. So in short, when we talk about some of the benefits that beavers bring, these are some of the things that scientists have started to recognize. So there's a lot of really great research coming into the scientific community about the benefits of beavers. Salmon populations are enhanced when beavers are present. We're also seeing beavers recharging aquifers, again, keeping fresh water on the land. And I know in Alberta and of course BC, when we've had terrible forest fires, again, having fresh water on the land is a real asset. Drought, erosion, all of these things that, again, can be addressed by beaver activity. Challenges with beavers. So the fur bearers started getting involved with beavers probably about 10 years ago. And what had happened was that as an organization that advocates against trapping, we started hearing from different communities who were trapping beavers because of beaver activity. So, dropping trees, give you some of the headlines here. So these are some of the issues that we're grappling with. Beavers wrecked a wedding somewhere. They hit the power off as a problem. So dropping trees, causing flooding out highways, flooding out lands. So the beavers were getting sort of a bad reputation for themselves. And as a typical response, many municipalities simply trap and kill beavers. And they do that using a conibear trap. This is what a conibear trap looks like. So earlier today we heard a little bit about snare trapping, which is the wire noose. This is another popular trap called a conibear. The inventor was named Frank Conibear, so that's where the name comes from. And it's a really, there's different sizes and models and shapes, but the objective of a conibear trap is to break an animal's spine, rendering them unconscious. They're pretty fierce traps, and of course they're indiscriminate, and anything that sets the trigger is going to set it off. So a conibear, it's hard to sort of understand the mechanics of it visually because it's a really awkward looking device, but essentially what you're looking at is the pin that comes down with the two spikes is the trigger. So when an animal sticks their head through those spikes, the trap comes down, slamming on the back of their neck and their spine. So it's very similar to a mouse trap. If you can think of the classic spring mouse trap design, that's a sort of a similar concept of how the conibear trap works. And then the two side parts, those are springs. So to set a conibear, you have to compress the springs, and it was, again, sort of similar to what Gilbert was talking about with the power spring on the snare trap. So it just adds that extra pressure. So conibears can be found right across Canada. They're used for a variety of species. They're quite popular, actually. And they're used often for beavers. They can be set underwater. They can be set inside lodges. They are used often. Beavers will travel on the banks and build slides, and you can find conibears sort of any time that the land comes in and narrows, sort of forcing these animals to come through the trap on how animals end up in this device. So we knew that there was quite a bit of beaver trapping happening across Canada, and we also knew that there was a lot of problems associated with having these traps so close to home. And this is a dog named Sasha. Sasha is an Australian shepherd that was killed in a conibear trap about a year ago in British Columbia. And it's not unusual. Throughout the year, we often hear reports of people's pets, dogs, cats. There are reported cases, although rare, of children being caught in traps. And so our argument is that certainly trapping is controversial, but to have traps like these so close to home is problematic and presents all kinds of other, in addition to animal welfare concerns, there's legitimate safety concerns about having these devices literally in our own backyards. Municipalities will often contract trappers to come in and set these devices under culverts or in different streams, and you can get permits to set them in our parks as well. So it's an issue we're aware of, and we felt like we needed to really develop a solution is to how do we manage some of the problems associated with beaver activity without resorting to lethal traps. So we began doing some research, and we ran into some different experts who had some success in the United States, specifically in the state of Massachusetts. So there's an individual named Mike Callahan, also another individual named Skip Lyle. Both are biologists who have been researching flow devices. So devices called pond levelers, beaver deceivers, beaver bafflers, beaver stops. These are all names of different devices. It's basically exclusion fencing. So it's a cage and pipe system that works in conjunction with a beaver dam, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how they work. And Lisa is going to just hit the video to give you just as a quick animation.
This is a North American beaver. Beavers are semi-aquatic mammals who live in multi-generational families. They most often live as a group inside a den or a lodge. Using trees, logs, and branches that either fall naturally or they take down, along with other debris, beavers float parts down a current and add it to a lodge or dam. This, along with the potential for flooding, is what many landowners and municipalities get worried about when beavers are in their communities. That's when the fur bearers get involved. As a keystone species, it is vital to keep beavers in ecosystems, and by understanding the biology and behavior of beavers, we are able to build sustainable and long-term solutions. A pond leveler works by ensuring water continues to flow through a dam without beavers being able to plug the hole. This is a great way to keep a stable family in place without worrying about flooding or infrastructure damage. This pond leveler was built and installed by one person in about 4 hours. An exclusion fence prevents beavers from damming up a culvert or other undesirable location. Fencing can also be used to prevent beavers from chewing trees or hydro poles you want protected. Humane, science-based solutions are available, and that means you and beavers can live together safely and happily. Learn more about living with wildlife at thefurbearers.com.
Go back. Just a quick illustration that really simplifies how flow devices work. And so when we first got involved with the Beaver Project, we really learned to adapt and adapt quickly. So we began by just sending information to municipalities, explaining to them how traps work, about the ethics of trapping. We would get involved with people in the communities who were speaking out at City Council, and we were providing all kinds of information and instructions and how-to DVD videos to communities, and frankly, they didn't care. And it wasn't until we actually offered to physically build the devices and pay for them that municipalities agreed to take us on, and frankly it's because they had no choice. And so one of the hard lessons we learned as an organization when it comes to talking about solutions, we need to be prepared to do the work, and we need to be prepared to fund the work for ourselves, and only then do you get buy-in. And even the buy-in that we've had in the past has been sort of reluctant. There was a lot of skepticism that they're not going to work, it's going to be a problem, it's going to be a liability. So it's taken some convincing on our part to sort of court these municipalities, get them to sort of understand these different projects, how they work. And of course, we would often just give them an out saying that if it didn't work, if there were any problems, we would just simply remove the device and they could go on there and go do their own business. But so far our program has been really successful. We have been invited to Alberta several times. We've worked with parks in Alberta. We've also worked with the city of Calgary to install flow devices. There are flow devices in Alberta. There's also quite a few in BC that we've been a part of, Ontario as well. We see a need right across Canada, and it's only through funding being limited that's our limitation, but certainly the will is there, and it's a really great project. And one of the reasons I like working on beaver issues is that it's a success story. I believe that it's tangible, it's winnable. I think that beavers, because they're so tied to our history, it's a really great talking point. And beavers have such a beautiful story, like monogamous pairs, 3 generations in a family, they're social, they're curious, they're cute. And then of course now all these conversations about climate change and water, people talking about the next war is going to be over water. And here we have an animal who keeps fresh water on the landscape, and yet we eradicate them like pests. And so it's a really great entry point, I think, for the conversation about coexistence, where if we can rally behind an animal that is already our national animal, that already provides these scientifically proven benefits, and we already have an opportunity to coexist with them and basically eliminate the need for trapping, I think it's a really great project to get behind, and we're really excited about our work that we do around beavers. So again, just sort of looking at some of these solutions, there is no real formula of how big is the pipe and how much fence do you need. There are some basics. So the intake that you're seeing on the left side, that cage, is 6 by 6 inches metal. The reason why it's recommended to be 6 by 6 is it allows the passage for fish and debris, which is great. The cage being like that prevents the beavers from blocking up that pipe. Beavers have an evolutionary trait. When they hear or feel water running, they want to dam it. And so this literally sort of tricks beavers because they don't quite understand the top and the bottom and how water is flowing into this device. So while they might block part of it, they're not able to successfully block the entire pipe. And then of course, when you go to a beaver site, you break the dam, you notch the dam, so you don't destroy the dam. In other cases, people have used dynamite to blow up beaver dams, so we certainly don't advocate for that. So we simply notch the dam, you lay down the pipe, and it's so exciting to go to a project the next day and beavers will build the pipe into their dam, because beavers fix things. They're notorious for fixing things. So they actually help you, because what they do is that you notch the dam, you put down the pipe, and literally the next day you'll go back and they would have covered it all up. So they build it right into their dam. And then of course all it does is now you've got water going through their dam, but the beavers don't really understand what's going on, and they stay there. So sometimes beavers will relocate themselves. It's one part of this project that we need more information on, and we're working to secure funding to try to better understand the impact of flow devices on beaver behavior. So the University of British Columbia has expressed an interest in doing some more research, and there's lots of research that can be done related to flow devices. But so we sort of, in the projects that we've done, we've seen great success with these devices lasting, and that they don't get clogged up with debris. The beavers have remained on site, which is what we want. And then of course the water level, depending on the diameter of the pipe, you can control the height of the water. So typically beavers need about 3 feet, and they seem quite happy with that. So depending again on what the situation is, and like I said, a lot of this is case by case basis. So all of these are customizable. In terms of costs, again, costs vary depending on the scope of the project, but in most projects we've done are around the $800 mark, eight to say 1,000, and that's the cost for the materials. So pipe needs to be ordered, some fencing, you need some tools. And then usually we gather a group of volunteers and make a day of it, have some fun, bring some lunches. And so it's not this multi-million-dollar project or task. It's actually quite simple. Whereas compared to, contracting a trapper every year to come in, trapping can get quite costly. One of the other things we talk to people about trapping, particularly traps used to manage so-called pests, is that you can't kill your way out of these problems. So even if you don't have a problem with traps, is that if there's a food source and if there's habitat, many times animals simply return, and that's what we see with beavers, is that you can trap and kill them all you want, but year after year they just come back because there's something about that site or that structure that's really attractive. So something like a pond leveler really sort of addresses the root problem, and instead of moving the animals, we sort of work together. And then again, tree wrapping is something really popular. So we've wrapped trees. It depends on what the situation is, but typically trees that are really expensive, or trees that are maybe near someone's home, or if they were cut could pose some kind of imminent risk to people or their property. So those are the trees that you want to target. And when trees are wrapped like this, beavers simply relocate themselves. Again, if the food's not available, these animals will just simply move on. So it's a really great low-cost way of protecting some prized trees, or to prevent any type of tree falling on someone's home or that type of a thing. So we've had a lot of success with this, and anyone can do this. It's really straightforward stuff. You can buy the sheets here. Most hardware stores can work with you, order materials in, it's not a big deal. And then this is an example of a really textbook situation regarding beavers, culverts. So you see culverts all the time, all over the place. It simply transfers water, typically under road structures. So there's a really low tolerance for beaver activity near culverts, because if they flood, you can flood out highways, road structures, or block access to individuals and homes. So a lot of the roads crews, highways, municipalities, anything near an airport, again, there's a really low tolerance for any type of activity near a culvert. And so this is an example of an exclusion fence. And I like to think of it as basically a big baby gate. It's the same concept. If you don't want animals in there, you block access. And so what makes, though, an exclusion fence interesting is that it's sort of a trapezoidal structure. So you'll notice that this isn't perfectly square, and it's not meant to be. So there's, again, something about the trapezoid structure that scientists believe sort of deceive beavers into I guess, into not being able to block it. So again, the beavers don't really understand the different sides and angles. So typically in these situations, the beavers will dam the outer wall and they'll just use that one flat surface. But on the sides, on the back, and underneath, the beavers don't dam it. So what ends up happening again is beavers unsuccessfully try to dam up the culvert and they again simply move on to a more suitable location. And these are really low maintenance. These types of structures are a few $100s to put in, and it's not an all-day event. You can get one of these in depending on how big your culvert is for a few hours of labor. They last for about 10 years is typically the lifespan. Minimal maintenance, you want to check it for debris and that, that type of a thing, but again, it's fairly inexpensive. We do a lot of these with different municipalities, also landowners, people out in the county who have farmland and that type of a thing benefit from these structures. And then this is just a quick case study. This was taken this year. This was in the spring, and this was one of the biggest projects I think we had ever done, and this is in the city of Belleville in Ontario. And so quick backstory is it all started with a husband and wife who were kayaking in a ravine on the back of their home and came across a beaver that was drowning. They pulled the beaver up. Long story short, it was a leg hold. So the beaver was in a submersion set, so basically kind of going, down and up under the water. And the couple had lived in this area for 30 years, had no idea what was going on, didn't know that leg holds were still legal, they weren't aware trapping was happening in their community. Another long story short, found out that the municipality had contracted the trappers to kill the beavers. And this was mere feet from their home. So the couple sort of took up the fight with the city and convinced a city councillor to help them champion this issue. City council put forward a motion, and city council can do this, you want to work with your councillor, put forward a motion saying that the municipality would investigate non-lethal options, which was really great. And so we brought in Skip Lyle, who is one of the inventors of these devices. He's a real pioneer and expert in his field. He lives, I believe, in Massachusetts. He's on the East Coast in the States. So he flew up and worked with the city of Belleville, and we installed, this is a really massive pond leveler, basically. And then you can see what they're doing is they're sinking the intake, and it's more of a larger cage system. And again, a lot of this is sort of custom for the site. But I just followed up on this project about a few weeks ago, and it's working perfectly. There haven't been any flooding issues. The beavers remained in the area. The man who found the beaver also turns out he's a documentary filmmaker, which served him well. So he's got quite a story to tell and has since put together his story and is sending it around to some film festivals right now. So it's an amazing story of what this couple didn't know anything about, and now they're sort of experts in beavers themselves. So it's really cool. And the town seems quite happy with this project, and my understanding is they're interested in doing more. So that was a really great success. So I just wanted to conclude my talk by saying that when we think about wildlife conflict, we often think about the bears and the wolves and these beautiful carnivores. And they are beautiful and they're worthy of your consideration and your time. My job today is to advocate for the underdogs, the ones that people often don't think about, the little ones, the small ones, the ones that might be stinky, the ones that might be rodents, and to sort of get you thinking that are there ways in which we can coexist with these creatures, and certainly they're worthy of our consideration.